I was 28 when I got out. 10 years behind bars for something I didn't do. The guard handed me a plastic bag with my old clothes and said, "Good luck out there." Her voice was flat, rehearsed. She'd said those words 1,000 times. I stepped into the sunlight and it felt like knives. Everything was too bright, too loud, too fast. Cars honked. People rushed past. The air smelled like exhaust and hot asphalt. I had no phone, no money, no plan. Just an address I'd memorized a decade ago. My parents' house. The house I grew up in. The house where everything went wrong. The cab ride cost me the last $20 from the discharge envelope. The driver didn't ask questions. He had kind eyes in the rearview mirror, but he kept them on the road. I watched the streets blur past, half familiar, half alien. Trees I remembered were gone. Buildings I didn't recognize stood in their place. 10 years is a lifetime when you're not living it. When we pulled up to the house, my stomach dropped. The lawn was overgrown, weeds choking what used to be my mother's rose bushes, paint peeling in long strips. One of the shutters hung crooked like a broken arm. The mailbox leaned sideways, rusted and dented. I paid the driver and stood on the curb, holding that plastic bag, wondering if anyone still lived here, wondering if I should just turn around and walk away. I knocked. No answer. I tried the door. Unlocked. Inside smelled like mildew and old newspapers and something else. Neglect, maybe. That thick, stale smell of a place where people have stopped trying. Dust everywhere. Dust on the console table. Dust on the picture frames. Dust floating in the shafts of light coming through the dirty windows. I called out, "Mom? Dad?" My voice sounded strange in my own ears. Too small. Too careful. I hadn't used it much in 10 years except to say, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, ma'am," and "I understand." I walked through the living room. The couch was still there, sagging in the middle where my father used to sit. The TV was newer, bigger. On the coffee table sat a stack of bills, all red-stamped, past due, final notice, disconnection warning. I picked one up, electric company, 4 months overdue. I heard movement upstairs, footsteps, slow and hesitant. Then my mother appeared at the top of the stairs. She looked older, so much older. Her hair was gray now, pulled back in a loose bun. Her face was lined and thin. Her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to make herself smaller. She stared at me like I was a ghost. "Andrea," she whispered. I nodded. My throat was tight. She came down slowly, gripping the railing with both hands. When she reached me, she didn't hug me. She just stood there, looking at me with these tired, sad eyes and said, "You're out." Not a question, a statement, like she'd been counting the days but couldn't quite believe it was real. I said, "Yeah, I'm out." She glanced away, her hands twisted together. "Your father's at work. Jesse's around." Jesse, my brother, the reason I went to prison. The knot in my chest tightened. I asked, "Where's he working?" Mom shook her head. "He's not. Neither is your father." "Not really. It's been hard, Andrea. It's been so hard." She sat down on the couch and I sat beside her. The cushion exhaled dust. She told me everything. How Jesse had spiraled after the accident. Drinking, gambling, disappearing for days. How my father, Bill, had covered for him, forced all of us to lie, threatened me into silence, convinced me that taking the blame was the only way to keep the family together. How the guilt ate at them but pride kept them from speaking up. How Jesse got involved in bad business deals, loans he couldn't repay, schemes that collapsed one after another. How my mother's small catering company, the one she'd built from nothing, recipe by recipe, client by client, had been taken over by my father and Jesse while I was gone. How they ran it into the ground. How my father gave Jesse a fancy title and let him play businessman while the accounts drained. How the house was mortgaged twice over. How everything was falling apart. She said it all in this flat, exhausted voice. No tears, just facts. Like she'd cried herself dry years ago, and all that was left was this hollow report of destruction. I asked the question that had burned in me for a decade, the question that kept me awake on that thin prison mattress, staring at the underside of the bunk above me. "Why didn't you tell the truth?" She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since I'd walked in. "Your father said it would destroy the family, that Jesse was young, that he had his whole life ahead of him, that he had potential, that you were strong enough to handle it." Her voice cracked on the last word. I felt something crack inside me, too. I was 18, Mom. I had my whole life ahead, too. She closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek. Just one. I know, and I'm sorry. But Bill, he wouldn't listen, and I was scared. I was a coward. The word hung between us. Coward. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and demand why she let them do this to me. But looking at her, this woman who used to laugh, who used to dance in the kitchen while cooking, who used to hum old songs and kiss my forehead and tell me I could be anything, I just felt empty, hollowed out. Jesse came home an hour later. I heard his car pull up, engine rattling, heard the door slam. He walked in and stopped cold when he saw me. He'd gained weight. His face was puffy, his eyes bloodshot and ringed with dark circles. His clothes hung on him wrong. Expensive shirt, wrinkled and stained. He looked like someone who'd been running from something for a long time and finally gotten tired. "Andrea," he said. Not surprised, not happy, just resigned, like he'd been expecting this moment and dreading it. I stood up. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. 10 years of looking at concrete walls and chain-link fences, and now I was looking at the person who put me there. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable, cleared his throat. "Look, I cut him off. Where's Dad?" Jesse exhaled, rubbed his face. "At the bar. Where else?" I found Bill Lopez at Murphy's Tavern 3 blocks away. The same bar he'd been going to since I was a kid. The same sticky floors, the same neon beer signs, the same smell of stale beer and fried food. He was at the end of the bar, nursing a whiskey, talking loud to the bartender about nothing. Sports, politics, complaints about the world. When I walked up, he turned and his face went red. Anger or shame? I couldn't tell. Maybe both. "What the hell are you doing here?" he said. Not, "Welcome home." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I missed you." Just anger. I said, "I live here. Or I used to." He laughed, bitter and sharp. "You don't live anywhere, girl. You got nothing. No job, no money, no future. You're a convict." The word hit me like a fist. The bartender looked away, wiping the same spot on the counter over and over. I kept my voice steady, low. "I'm a convict because of you. Because you made me take the fall for Jesse." Bill slammed his glass down. Whiskey sloshed over the rim. "I saved this family. Jesse made a mistake. One mistake. You think I was going to let him throw his life away?" I leaned in close enough to smell the alcohol on his breath. "So you threw mine away instead." He stared at me. For a second, I thought I saw something. Guilt, maybe, or shame, or some flicker of the father I used to know. But then it hardened into that old familiar wall. The wall that said men make the decisions and women obey. "You're my daughter," he said. "You do what I tell you. That's how it works." I walked out. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. Clearer than it had been in 10 years. I knew what I had to do. I had to find proof. I had to prove what really happened that night. I had to take back my life. Not ask for it. Not beg for it. Take it. I went to the library and used the public computer. My fingers felt clumsy on the keyboard. Everything was different now. New operating systems, new websites, new ways of searching. But I learned. I searched newspaper archives. I found the article about the accident. A man named Thomas Reed, 42, father of 3, killed by a hit-and-run driver on Route 9 at 11:47 p.m. The car was found abandoned 2 miles away, driver's side door hanging open. Registered to William Lopez. I'd confessed to driving it. I'd said I panicked and ran. I'd said I was sorry. I'd pled guilty to vehicular manslaughter and leaving the scene. I got 10 years. Jesse walked free. I printed the article. My hands left sweat marks on the mouse. Then I started digging deeper. I found Jesse's social media. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. He wasn't smart enough to lock any of it down. Photos of him at clubs the week after the accident, grinning with a drink in his hand. Photos of him with a woman named Natalie Reeves, his fiancée, according to the tags. Beautiful woman, dark hair, bright smile. Photos of him at a corporate office, grinning in a suit that probably cost more than I made in a year before prison. I clicked through. He worked at Mom's company. Executive vice president. My blood boiled. I kept digging. I found posts about investment opportunities. Make your money work for you. Financial freedom is closer than you think. DM me for details. I clicked on the comments. Dozens of people asking questions. Dozens of people tagging friends. And then I found the complaints. Reddit threads, Facebook groups. People saying they'd been scammed. Saying Jessie Lopez took their money and disappeared. Saying they'd filed police reports. Saying they'd lost their savings, their retirement, their kids' college funds. I took screenshots of everything. Every single post. Every single complaint. Every single name. Then I found something else. A forum post from 2 years ago on a community message board. Someone claiming Jessie had confessed to the hit and run while drunk at a party. The post had been dismissed as gossip, downvoted, buried, but it had details. A date, a location, names of people who were there. I wrote them all down in a notebook I'd bought at the dollar store. Then I started tracking people down. It took days. Most wouldn't talk to me. They hung up when I said who I was. They closed the door in my face. They said they didn't want to get involved. But one woman, Maria Castillo, finally agreed to meet me. We sat in a Starbucks and she told me she'd been at that party. Jesse's 30th birthday. He'd gotten drunk, really drunk, and started crying, saying he killed someone, saying his dad made him stay quiet, saying his sister was in prison for him. Maria said, "I thought he was just drunk and dramatic. I didn't think it was real. I mean, who confesses to murder at a birthday party?" I said, "Someone who can't live with himself." She looked at me, really looked at me. "You're her, the sister." I nodded. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'll testify. If it helps put things right, I'll testify." I took everything to a lawyer. A public defender I found through a legal aid clinic. Her name was Karen Osei. She was young, maybe 30, with bright eyes and tired shoulders. Her office was a closet with a desk, files stacked everywhere. She was overworked and skeptical. She'd heard it all before, but she looked at my evidence. The screenshots, the forum posts, Maria's contact information, the newspaper articles, and her expression changed. She leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. "This is a long shot," she said. "But it's a shot." We filed a motion to vacate my conviction. It took 4 months. 4 months of waiting. 4 months of living in that broken house with my broken mother and my ghost of a brother and my father who couldn't look at me. 4 months of silence and tension and fear. I got a job washing dishes at a diner. Minimum wage. My hands cracked and bled from the hot water and harsh soap. But it was honest work. It was mine. And every paycheck, I saved a little. Just in case. Then the hearing happened. I sat in that courtroom and felt like I was 18 again. Scared. Small. But this time I wasn't alone. Karen sat beside me. Maria sat in the gallery. My mother came too, sitting in the back row, hands folded in her lap. Jessie wasn't there. Maria testified. She spoke clearly, confidently. She told the court what Jessie said. Jessie's lawyer tried to dismiss it all as hearsay, as the ramblings of a drunk man, as unreliable. But then Karen presented the other evidence, the investment scams, the complaints, the pattern of Jessie's behavior. She argued that Jessie Lopez was a man who hurt people and let others take the blame. The prosecutor, the same one who'd put me away 10 years ago, older now, grayer, stood up. He looked at me, then he looked at the judge. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence, the state does not oppose the motion." I almost collapsed. Karen grabbed my hand. The judge, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, looked at me and said, "Ms. Lopez, your conviction is vacated. You are free to go." Free. Actually free. The fallout was immediate. The police reopened the hit-and-run case. They brought Jesse in for questioning. He lawyered up, but it didn't matter. Maria's testimony, combined with forensic evidence they'd kept from the original investigation, was enough. They arrested Jesse 2 days later. I watched it on the local news. Footage of him being let out of the house in handcuffs, head down, surrounded by reporters. He was charged with vehicular manslaughter, obstruction of justice, and, thanks to the scam complaints, multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. Natalie was arrested too. She'd been part of the investment scheme, funneling money through fake accounts, setting up shell companies. They'd stolen over $300,000. My father wasn't charged, but the guilt, or maybe just the public shame, broke him. He stopped going to the bar. He stopped talking. He just sat in that house like a statue, staring at the TV without seeing it. My mother, though. My mother changed. One morning, About a week after Jesse's arrest, she looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "I want the company back. I want to fix this." Her voice was different, stronger. I said, "Then let's fix it." We went through the books together. It was worse than I thought. Jesse had embezzled over $200,000. The company was drowning in debt. Vendors hadn't been paid. Equipment had been sold off. The commercial kitchen lease was 3 months past due. But the clients, the ones who'd been with my mother from the beginning, who remembered her food and her kindness, they wanted to help. They organized a fundraiser. They spread the word on social media. They left reviews praising the old days, the good days. Slowly, painfully, we started rebuilding. My mother took back the CEO title. I became COO, Chief Operating Officer. Me, the ex-con, the scapegoat. We worked 16-hour days. We apologized to every person Jesse had hurt, every investor he'd scammed. We set up payment plans. We returned what money we could. We offered free catering services to make amends. It was exhausting. It was humbling. We got yelled at. We got doors slammed in our faces. But we kept going. And slowly, people started to forgive. Not everyone, but enough. We got new clients. We hired back old employees. We bought new equipment. The kitchen started to smell like food again instead of dust and regret. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt like I was living my own life. Not the life someone told me to live. Not a life of punishment and silence. Just mine. Then, one afternoon in late spring, I got a call from a woman named Melanie Torres. She said she'd seen the news about my case and wanted to meet. She said it was urgent. I didn't know her, but something in her voice, a tremor, a desperation, felt familiar. We met at a coffee shop downtown. She was young, maybe 23, with long dark hair and circles under her eyes that looked like bruises. She ordered tea but didn't drink it, just held the cup like she needed something to anchor her hands. She said, "I need your help. My father, he's like yours, controlling, abusive, and I'm scared." She told me her story and I listened, my stomach sinking with every word. Her father, Jason Torres, had been cheating on her mother, Isabella, for years. Not just cheating. He had a second family, a woman named Marilyn, and a baby boy named Brian. Melanie had found out by accident. She'd seen a text on his phone, followed him one day, watched him walk into another house, another life. She'd confronted him and he'd grabbed her by the throat, pressed her against the wall, told her to keep her mouth shut, or he'd destroy her mother. Then Isabella went into premature labor, 7 months pregnant, bleeding, screaming in pain. Jason refused to take her to the hospital, said it was too expensive, said she was faking, said she was dramatic and weak and always making problems. Melanie called 911 herself, hands shaking, while her father yelled at her. The paramedics came. They saved Isabella. They saved the baby, a little girl they named Sophia. But Jason vanished, took the car, took the savings, took everything, left them with nothing but hospital bills and fear. I listened to her story and felt a horrible, familiar ache in my chest. The ache of being blamed, of being powerless, of being told to stay quiet while men destroy everything. I said, "What do you need from me?" She looked at me with these wide, wet eyes. "Courage. I don't know how to fight back. I don't know how to stop being afraid of him. He's still out there. He calls. He threatens. He says he'll come back and finish what he started. And I freeze. I can't move. I can't think." I thought about that. About the 10 years I spent frozen. About the moment I decided to stop. I told her, "You already have courage. You called 911. You saved your mom and your sister. That's courage. Now you just have to keep going." She shook her head. "How?" I leaned forward. "One step at a time. Start by telling the truth. Publicly. Loudly. Make it impossible for him to hide." She looked terrified. "What if it makes things worse?" I said, "It might. But staying silent definitely won't make things better." She nodded slowly, wiped her eyes. Okay, I'll try." She did more than try. She went home and she made a video. Just her, sitting in her bedroom, phone propped on a stack of books. She told her entire story. She named her father. She showed photos of the second family, photos she'd taken that day she followed him. She showed hospital bills. She showed bank statements with zeros where there used to be savings. She talked about the abuse, the control, the threats. She tagged local news stations. She used hashtags. She posted it everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. And then she waited. Within 48 hours, the video had 3 million views. The local news picked it up. Then the national news. Jason Torres became a name people knew, a face people recognized. And he couldn't hide anymore. The police found him a week later, living with Marilyn and baby Brian in a town 2 hours away. He was arrested and charged with domestic violence, child abandonment, financial abuse, and fraud. He'd opened credit cards in Isabella's name, taken out loans, destroyed her credit. The charges piled up. But more than that, Melanie's story inspired other women to come forward. Women who'd been silenced by abusive men. Women who'd been blamed and shamed and told to stay quiet for the sake of the family. Women who'd lost years, lost themselves, lost hope. They started sharing their stories too. It became a movement, small but fierce. A chorus of voices saying, "Not anymore." And I found myself at the center of it. Not because I wanted to be, but because people kept reaching out, kept asking for advice, kept telling me, "Your story gave me strength." One of those people was Manuel Torres. Manny, everyone called him. He was Jason's father and Melanie's grandfather, a man in his 60s who ran a small construction company and fancied himself a patriarch, a patron. He had old-world ideas about women. They should cook. They should clean. They should serve. They should obey. They should never, ever challenge a man. He believed this with every fiber of his being. And when Melanie's story went viral, when his son was arrested, when the family name was dragged through the mud, he was furious. Not at Jason, at Melanie, for speaking up, for embarrassing the family, for being disloyal. He had a son-in-law named Gus Ramirez. Gus was married to Manny's daughter, Carmen, and Gus ran a podcast called Real Men Rising, one of those toxic masculinity channels where men complained about feminism, called women emotional and weak, ranted about traditional values and respect, and how society was going soft. He had 2 million followers, mostly young men, angry men, men who felt left behind and wanted someone to blame. And when Melanie's story went viral, Gus made an episode about it. Episode 247, Family Traitors and the Women Who Destroy Them. He called Melanie a liar. He called her manipulative. He said she destroyed her father's life for attention. He called me a criminal trying to play victim. He said women like us were destroying families, destroying society, destroying everything good and decent. He said we needed to be stopped. His followers flooded our social media with hate, death threats, rape threats, doxing. They found our addresses. They called our workplaces. They sent messages to our families. It was brutal, relentless, terrifying. I wanted to hide. I wanted to delete everything and disappear, go back to being invisible, safe. But then I remembered what I told Melanie. Tell the truth, loudly. And I realized that hiding was just another form of silence. So I didn't hide. I made a video. I sat in my living room with my phone propped up on the coffee table, and I talked. I said, "My name is Andrea Lopez. I spent 10 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit because my father decided my brother's future was worth more than mine. I was silent for 10 years. I'm not silent anymore." I told the whole story. The accident. Thomas Reed. The cover-up. The exoneration. Jesse's arrest. The rebuild. I said, "If you're scared of powerful men, I get it. I was too. But they're only powerful because we stay quiet. So stop staying quiet. Tell your story. Find your people. Fight back." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just spoke, clearly, firmly, and then I posted it. The video got 2 million views in a week, 5 million in 2 weeks. People shared it. People commented. People sent messages saying, "Thank you. I needed to hear this." But Gus made another episode. Episode 251, Andrea Lopez and the Lie That Launched 1,000 Feminists. He was angrier this time, louder. He called me a fraud. He said I was using my sob story for attention and money. He said Melanie and I were part of a conspiracy to destroy men, to emasculate society, to tear down the natural order. He said his followers needed to stand up, needed to fight back, needed to protect their families from women like us. And for a few days, it worked. The hate intensified. I got emails telling me to kill myself. I got packages with dead flowers and crude drawings. Someone spray-painted "liar" on the side of our building. My mother started sleeping with a bat next to her bed. But then, something shifted. Women started fighting back. And not just women. Men too. Good men. Men who'd been silent, who'd watched this toxic garbage spread and said nothing because it didn't affect them directly. They flooded Gus's comments. They called him out. They shared their own stories. Stories of sisters, mothers, daughters who'd been abused and silenced. Stories of learning to be better, to listen, to stand up. Brands started pulling sponsorships from his podcast. His follower count dropped. First slowly, then faster. Companies that had advertised on his show released statements distancing themselves. His Patreon collapsed. His speaking events got canceled. And Manny, trying to defend him, made things worse. Manny went on a local radio show, The Morning Drive with Rick Salazar, to defend his son-in-law and his family honor. Rick Salazar was a tough interviewer. Fair, but tough. He asked Manny, "What do you think about your granddaughter's allegations?" Manny said, "She's confused. She's young. She doesn't understand how families work." Rick pressed, "She says your son beat his wife and abandoned his children. Is she lying?" Manny stumbled. "No, she's exaggerating. Women today, they have no respect. They don't know their place." Rick leaned in. "Their place? What does that mean?" Manny got defensive. "You know what I mean. My generation, we knew how to keep families strong. Men led, women supported. It worked." Rick asked, "By silencing abuse?" Manny's face went red. "No, by having values, by having structure. Not this chaos where everyone does what they want." Rick said, "Your son had a secret family while his wife raised your grandchildren. Is that structure?" Manny got angry. "You don't understand. You're twisting my words." He stood up, ripped off his microphone, and walked out. The interview went viral. Clips everywhere, comments tearing him apart. His construction company faced protests. People refused to hire him. Clients canceled contracts. His reputation crumbled. Within a month, Gus lost 3/4 of his sponsors. His podcast downloads dropped by 60%. Carmen, his wife, left him. She moved in with her mother and filed for divorce, citing emotional abuse. She made a statement online saying, "I stood by silently while my husband spread hate. I was complicit. I'm sorry. And I'm done." Manny's company went under. He filed for bankruptcy, and Jason Torres, in jail awaiting trial, had no one left to defend him, no one to pay for his lawyer, no one to visit him. He was alone, and Melanie's mother, Isabella, filed for full custody of baby Sophia and won. She also sued for the stolen money, the destroyed credit, the years of abuse. She didn't get everything back. You never do. But she got enough to start over, to breathe, to be free. The legal battles dragged on for nearly a year. Jesse was convicted and sentenced to 12 years for vehicular manslaughter, obstruction of justice, and multiple counts of fraud. Natalie got 8 years for her role in the investment schemes. My father was never criminally charged, but he became a ghost. He moved out of the house one day while my mother and I were at work. Just packed a bag and left. No note. No goodbye. We heard later that he was living in a motel on the edge of town, drinking away his Social Security checks. My mother filed for divorce. It was quick, uncontested. He didn't even show up to court. She took back her maiden name, Mary Gutierrez. She said it felt like shedding skin, like becoming herself again. The company grew. We paid off the debts. We hired new people, good people, people who cared about the work. We expanded the menu. We bought a food truck. We started catering weddings, corporate events, quinceañeras, anniversaries. We even started offering mentorship programs for women starting their own businesses, cooking classes, business workshops. We partnered with a local women's shelter to provide job training and employment. It felt like something good was growing out of all the pain, like maybe the suffering had weight if you used it to lift others up. I didn't believe in silver linings or meant to be or everything happens for a reason. Those phrases felt like lies people told to make senseless pain bearable. But I believed in what you did with the wreckage. And I chose to build. Melanie and I stayed in touch. We talked every week, sometimes more. She started college, studying social work at the State University. She wanted to help other families escape abuse. She wanted to work with kids like her little sister Sophia, kids growing up in the aftermath of violence. Isabella recovered, physically and emotionally. She went back to work as a nurse, night shifts at the hospital. She was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for. She'd survived Jason Torres. She'd survived poverty and fear, and the humiliation of having her life exposed online. And she'd kept going. One day, Melanie called me crying. Not sad crying, happy crying. She said, "I got accepted into the master's program, full scholarship, and Mom's getting remarried. To a good man, Andrea. A really good man." I started crying too. "That's beautiful, Melanie. I'm so happy for you both." She laughed through the tears. "I want to thank you for showing me it's possible, for being brave first so I could be brave second." I said, "You did that yourself. I just reminded you that you could." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We reminded each other." After we hung up, I sat on my porch. Not the porch of my parents' old house. We'd sold that, paid off the liens, split what was left with my mother. I sat on the porch of the small house my mother and I now owned together, a 2-bedroom bungalow with a big kitchen and a garden out back, where my mother was replanting her roses. The evening light was soft and golden. Somewhere down the street, kids were playing. I could hear their laughter. I thought about the girl I used to be, 18, scared, obedient, willing to sacrifice herself because someone told her that's what good daughters do. That's what family means. I thought about the woman I'd become, 38 now, still scared sometimes, still figuring things out, but not obedient, not silent, not a sacrifice, just human, flawed, trying, and free. I thought about Thomas Reed, the man Jesse killed, the man whose family never got real justice until I fought for it. His kids, adults now, in their 30s, had reached out to me after Jesse's conviction. We met at a diner. They said, "Thank you. It doesn't bring him back. It doesn't undo what happened. But it helps. It helps to know the truth finally came out." His daughter Rebecca said, "We blamed ourselves for years. We thought maybe if we'd called him that night, if we'd asked him not to drive, if we'd done something different. But it wasn't our fault. It was never our fault." I held her hand across the table and said, "No, it wasn't." We cried together, strangers connected by tragedy. And when we left, I felt a little lighter. Like I'd carried something heavy for so long and finally set it down. I thought about how many lives one lie can ruin, how it ripples outward, touching people you'll never meet, destroying futures you'll never see. But I also thought about how many lives one truth can heal, how standing up can inspire someone else to stand up, how one voice becomes 2, becomes 10, becomes 1,000. The world isn't fair. It's not kind. It doesn't hand out happy endings like prizes. Most of the time it's hard and cruel and indifferent, but it does give you choices. You can stay silent and let the powerful win. You can bow your head and accept that this is just how things are. Or you can speak up and risk everything. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, speaking up works. Sometimes the truth matters. Sometimes people listen. Sometimes justice, slow and imperfect and hard-won, actually happens. My mother came out onto the porch with 2 mugs of tea. Chamomile. The smell reminded me of childhood, of nights when I couldn't sleep, and she'd sit with me, telling me stories until my eyes got heavy. She handed me a mug and sat beside me in the other chair. We didn't talk. We just sat there sipping our tea, watching the sunset turn the sky orange and pink and purple. Birds sang their evening songs. The air cooled. Somewhere nearby, someone was grilling and the smell of charcoal and meat drifted over. It was ordinary, simple, and it was everything. I felt something I hadn't felt in 10 years. Peace, not happiness, that seemed too big, too bright, too simple. Not closure, because some wounds never fully close, but peace, the kind that comes from knowing you fought back, that you survived, that you helped others survive, that you turned your pain into something that mattered, that you refused to let them erase you. And that, I thought, is enough, maybe more than enough. Maybe it's everything. If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll share it. Not for me, not for views or likes or whatever metric we use to measure whether something matters. Share it for the people out there who are still silent, who are still scared, who think they're alone, who think their voice doesn't matter, who think fighting back is impossible. They're not alone. There are more of us than you think. People who've been blamed for things they didn't do. People who've been crushed by power and shame and lies. People who've been told to stay quiet, to be good, to sacrifice themselves for the family, for the peace, for the greater good. People who decided to stand up anyway. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And if you need a reminder that it's possible to fight back, to heal, to reclaim your life from people who tried to take it, well, here's your reminder. It's possible. It's hard. It's messy. It won't look like the movies. There won't be a moment where everything suddenly makes sense, and the music swells and everyone hugs and apologizes. Real healing is slower, quieter. It's getting up every day and choosing to try. It's finding your people. It's telling your truth even when your voice shakes. It's believing that you deserve better even when everyone around you says you don't. And you don't have to do it alone. Find your people. Tell your truth. And don't let anyone convince you that silence is strength. Silence is survival. It's what we do when we have no other choice. But speaking up, that's how you live. That's how you take back what they tried to steal from you. I learned something else too. Something I didn't expect. When you speak up, when you refuse to be silent, you don't just free yourself. You free other people. People you'll never meet. People who'll see your story and think, if she can do it, maybe I can too. That's what Melanie did for me, in a way. She reminded me that my pain had purpose, that my story could be a bridge for someone else. And that's what I want this to be. A bridge. A reminder. A hand reaching out in the dark saying, you're not alone. Keep going. The company continued to grow. 6 months after Jesse's conviction, we opened a second location. A small storefront in the downtown area with big windows and warm lighting. We called it Gutierrez Kitchen, my mother's maiden name, her legacy. On opening day, we were packed. Old clients came. New clients came. People who'd read about us online, who wanted to support what we were building. My mother stood behind the counter, beaming, and I saw the woman she used to be, the woman she'd buried under years of my father's control and Jesse's chaos. She was back, and she was radiant. We hired women from the shelter, women rebuilding their lives after leaving abusive relationships. We trained them, paid them fair wages, gave them flexible schedules so they could take care of their kids, go to therapy, handle court dates. Some of them stayed for months and moved on to other opportunities. Some of them stayed for years and became managers, partners, friends. One woman, Rosa, told me, "You gave me more than a job. You gave me proof that I could still build something, that I wasn't broken." I hugged her and said, "You were never broken. You were just surviving. Now you're living." Around this time, I started getting interview requests. Local news, podcasts, online publications. At first I said no. I didn't want to be a public figure. I didn't want to be the poster child for wrongful conviction or family betrayal or whatever narrative people wanted to attach to me. But then I realized that saying no was another form of hiding, and I was done hiding. So I started saying yes. I told my story over and over. Each time it got a little easier. Each time I felt a little less like a victim and a little more like a survivor, a fighter, someone who'd been knocked down and got back up. One interview changed everything. It was a podcast called Justice Delayed, a show about wrongful convictions and criminal justice reform. The host, a woman named Aisha Patel, was smart and compassionate. She didn't sensationalize. She just let me talk. And I did. I talked about the night of the accident, about my father's threats, about the fear that kept me silent, about the prison years, the cold, the noise, the isolation, the daily humiliation of being stripped of your autonomy, about getting out and finding everything destroyed, about fighting back, about winning. The episode went viral. Within a week, it had been downloaded over 1 million times. Within a month, I was getting calls from lawyers, activists, journalists. People wanted to know if I'd speak at conferences, if I'd consult on other wrongful conviction cases, if I'd help them fight. I said yes to some of it. I became an advocate, though I never meant to. I started working with the Innocence Project, helping other people navigate the nightmare of proving their innocence. I spoke at universities about the failures of our justice system. I testified before state legislative committees about the need for reform, better evidence preservation, stricter rules about coerced confessions, compensation for the wrongfully convicted. It was exhausting, but it was meaningful, and every time I helped someone else get free, I felt like I was honoring the 10 years I lost, like I was turning that suffering into something that mattered. Meanwhile, Gus Ramirez's fall continued. His podcast limped along for a few more months, with dwindling numbers before he finally shut it down. He tried to rebrand, to soften his message, but no one was buying it. The damage was done. He got a job at a warehouse. Carmen's divorce was finalized. She got custody of their 2 kids and moved across the country to start fresh. Manny Torres died of a heart attack 8 months after his company collapsed. Melanie didn't go to the funeral. She told me, "I can't mourn someone who never saw me as fully human, who thought I existed to serve him and stay quiet. I mourned the grandfather I wished I had. The real one? I let go of him a long time ago." Jason Torres went to trial. The evidence was overwhelming. Multiple counts of domestic violence, financial abuse, child abandonment. He was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 15 years. Marilyn, the other woman, testified against him. Turned out he'd been abusing her too, controlling her money, isolating her from her family. She said, "I thought he loved me. I thought I was special, but I was just another woman he could control." After Jason was sentenced, she reached out to Isabella. It was awkward at first, painful, but they talked, and they realized they weren't enemies. They were both victims of the same man. They weren't friends exactly, but they had an understanding, a shared truth. And little Brian, Jason's son with Marilyn, grew up knowing his sister Sophia. Melanie made sure of it. She said, "These kids didn't ask for any of this. They deserve to know each other, to have family that's honest and kind." Jesse served his time quietly. No appeals, no interviews. He just disappeared into the system the way I had. I didn't visit him. People asked me if I would, if I'd forgiven him. I said, "Forgiveness isn't something I owe him. He destroyed my life and never apologized. He let me rot in prison for a decade and moved on like it was nothing. If he wants forgiveness, he can start by taking responsibility. Until then, I have nothing to say to him." Some people thought I was cold, hard, but I didn't care. I'd spent too long caring what other people thought, doing what I was told, being the good daughter, the good sister, the good victim. I was done with that. I was allowed to be angry. I was allowed to protect myself. And if that made me difficult, so be it. My father, Bill, drank himself to death 3 years after I got out. Liver failure. My mother got the call from the hospital. He'd been brought in unconscious, alone. He died 2 days later without waking up. My mother went to the hospital, but she didn't cry. She just looked at him lying there, small and yellow and withered, and said, "I wasted so much of my life being afraid of you." Then she turned and walked out. We didn't have a funeral. We had him cremated and scattered his ashes in the desert outside of town. My mother said, "He wanted to be in control of everything. Now he's just dust in the wind." It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't satisfying. It was just sad. Sad that he'd spent his whole life building walls between himself and the people who loved him. Sad that he'd chosen pride and power over truth and family. Sad that he'd died alone, unmourned, unforgiven. But we didn't let his death define us. We kept building. My mother started teaching cooking classes at the community center. She taught women how to make traditional dishes, how to start small catering businesses, how to trust themselves in the kitchen. She glowed when she taught. She came alive. I watched her and thought about all the years she'd spent dimmed, made small by a man who was terrified of her light. Now she was shining again, and it was beautiful. I met someone. I didn't expect to. I wasn't looking. But his name was David Chen, and he was a social worker at the women's shelter where we hired from. He was kind, patient. He listened more than he talked. He had this quiet strength that reminded me of still water, calm on the surface but deep underneath. We became friends first. Then, slowly, something more. He knew my history. He knew my scars. And he didn't try to fix me or save me. He just saw me, the whole messy, complicated, wounded, healing me. And he stayed. We took it slow. I was learning how to trust again, how to let someone in without losing myself. It was hard. I had nightmares sometimes, panic attacks, moments where I shut down completely. But David was patient. He held space for my healing without making it his responsibility. He let me be broken and whole at the same time, and that was a gift. 4 years after my release, Melanie graduated with her master's degree in social work. I flew out to attend her ceremony. Isabella was there, glowing with pride. Sophia, now 6 years old, sat on my lap during the ceremony, whispering questions about everything. When Melanie's name was called, we all stood and cheered so loud that people turned around and smiled. After the ceremony, we went out for dinner. Melanie raised her glass and said, "To Andrea, for showing me that we don't have to accept the stories other people write for us. We can write our own." We clinked glasses. I looked around the table at these women, Melanie, Isabella, Sophia, my mother, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude, not for the suffering, never that, but for having survived it, for having found each other in the wreckage, for having built something beautiful out of the broken pieces. 5 years after my release, I was invited to speak at a national conference on wrongful convictions. The keynote address. I was terrified, but I went. I stood on that stage in front of 500 people and I told my story. I talked about the cost of silence, about the power of truth, about the importance of believing survivors, of questioning authority, of demanding justice even when it's hard. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. People stood. Some were crying. Afterward, dozens of people came up to me. Some were exonerees like me. Some were family members of the wrongfully convicted. Some were lawyers and activists and journalists. And some were just people who'd been silent about something and needed to hear that speaking up was possible. A young woman, maybe 19, came up to me crying. She said, "My father's in prison for something he didn't do. I've been too scared to fight for him, but after hearing you, I'm going to try. I'm going to fight." I hugged her tight and said, "You can do this. You're stronger than you know." That night, alone in my hotel room, I thought about the girl I was at 18. If I could go back and talk to her, what would I say? Would I tell her not to take the deal? Would I warn her about the years of suffering ahead? Would I tell her to run? No, because that girl wouldn't have listened. She was too scared, too trained to obey, too convinced that her worth was in her sacrifice. But if I could, I'd tell her this: you're going to survive. It's going to be harder than you can imagine. You're going to lose years. You're going to lose parts of yourself, but you're going to survive. And on the other side, you're going to be someone you can't even picture right now. Someone strong, someone free, someone who uses her pain to help others. So hold on. Just hold on. The company continued to thrive. We opened a 3rd location. We published a cookbook, my mother's recipes, stories from our journey, essays about resilience and rebuilding. It became a local bestseller. We used the profits to start a scholarship fund for women pursuing culinary careers. We called it the Mary Gutierrez Scholarship for Culinary Excellence and Courage. The word courage was my addition. My mother cried when we announced it. She said, "I never thought my name would mean something good. I thought I'd just be remembered as the woman who stayed silent." I took her hand and said, "You're remembered as the woman who found her voice. That's better." David and I got married in a small ceremony 6 years after my release. Just close friends and family. Melanie was there, Isabella and Sophia, my mother, some of the women from the shelter who'd become like sisters. We got married in my mother's garden, under the rose arbor she'd planted. It wasn't fancy, just honest, real. David's vows made me cry. He said, "You taught me that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about breaking and choosing to heal, about being knocked down and getting back up. I'm honored to walk beside you, to witness your healing, to build a life with you." I said my vows through tears. You saw me at my worst. You saw my anger and my fear and my brokenness, and you didn't look away. You didn't try to fix me. You just loved me. That's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me. We didn't have kids. It was a choice we made together. I'd lost too many years. I had too much work to do, and that was okay. We had Sophia and the other kids in our lives. We had the women at the shelter. We had our community. That was family enough, and it was beautiful. 7 years after my release, I got a letter, prison mail, from Jesse. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter was short. He wrote, "Andrea, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know sorry doesn't fix what I did, but I need you to know that I think about you every day, about what I stole from you. I was a coward. I let Dad control me. I let my fear control me. I destroyed your life to save my own. There's no excuse, no justification. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. And I'm sorry. You don't have to write back. You don't owe me anything. I just needed to say it. I'm sorry. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer. I didn't write back. Not then. Maybe someday. Maybe never. I didn't know. And I didn't need to know. Forgiveness wasn't something I had to decide right now. It wasn't a debt I owed. It was a door I could choose to open or keep closed. And for now, it stayed closed. And that was okay. Thomas Reed's family reached out again on the 10th anniversary of his death. They'd started a foundation in his name, a scholarship for single parents going back to school. They asked if I'd join the board. I said yes. We met quarterly. We reviewed applications. We gave money to people trying to rebuild their lives, to create better futures for their kids. It felt right, like closing a circle, like honoring the man whose death had destroyed so many lives, including mine, by helping others live better. His daughter Rebecca became a friend. We had coffee sometimes, talked about life, loss, healing. She told me once, "I used to hate you. When we thought you killed my dad, I had nightmares about you. But now I realize you were a victim too." We both lost something that night. We both had to find a way to keep living. I nodded. Yeah, we did. 10 years after my release, I stood in front of the state legislature and testified in support of a bill that would provide compensation for the wrongfully convicted. $5,000 for every year of wrongful imprisonment. It wasn't enough. Money could never be enough. But it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was the state saying, "We failed you. This is how we make it right." I told my story again. I'd told it so many times now that it almost felt like someone else's. But I told it because it mattered. Because every time I told it, someone listened. Someone learned. Someone changed their mind. The bill passed. It wasn't perfect. But it was progress. And progress was enough. My mother retired at 70. She handed the company over to me fully. She said, "I built this once. You rebuilt it better. Now it's yours. Make it whatever you want it to be." I hugged her and said, "I want it to be a place where people can heal, where they can find dignity and hope and a second chance." She smiled. "Then that's what it'll be." She spent her retirement traveling, something she'd never done. She went to Mexico, to Spain, to Italy. She sent me postcards from every place. "The food here is amazing. I'm learning to paint. I'm happy, mija. Really happy." Those postcards made me cry. Happy tears. Because she deserved happiness. She deserved to take up space, to live loudly, to be free. Melanie opened her own practice, specializing in trauma and family therapy. She worked mostly with abuse survivors and their children. She was brilliant at it. Compassionate but firm. She didn't let people hide from their pain. She walked them through it. She told me once, "I use my story with my clients. Not all of it, but enough. I let them know I understand, that I've been where they are, and that it's possible to heal." I was so proud of her, this young woman who'd been so scared, who'd called me crying in a coffee shop, who'd found her courage and used it to help others. She was a warrior, a healer, a light. David and I bought a small house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Just a 2-bedroom with a big backyard and a vegetable garden. We spent our weekends planting tomatoes, peppers, zucchini. We cooked together. We sat on the porch in the evenings and talked about everything and nothing. We built a quiet, honest life, and it was everything I'd ever wanted. Not exciting, not dramatic, just real, just ours, just free. I still had hard days, days when the anger came back, days when I thought about the 10 years I lost and wanted to scream. Days when I saw Jesse's face in my mind and felt the old rage burning. Days when I wondered what my life would have been if my father had just told the truth, if Jesse had just taken responsibility, if my mother had just stood up. But those days came less often now, and when they came, I let myself feel them. I let myself be angry. I let myself grieve, and then I let it go, because holding on to it only hurt me, and I'd been hurt enough. I thought about writing a book, my full story. Not just the wrongful conviction, but everything. The childhood, the family dynamics, the prison years, the rebuilding, the advocacy work, the healing. I thought about it for years. And then, finally, I started writing. It was hard, dredging up all those memories, all that pain, but it was also freeing, like I was taking all the poison inside me and putting it on the page where it couldn't hurt me anymore. The book took 3 years to write. It was published on the 15th anniversary of my release. We had a launch party at Gutierrez Kitchen. Everyone came. Melanie, Isabella, Sophia, now a teenager, the women from the shelter, my lawyer Karen, Thomas Reed's family, David, my mother. We filled the restaurant. People bought copies and asked me to sign them. I wrote the same thing in every book. Your voice matters. Use it. The book did well, better than I expected. It was reviewed in major newspapers. I did interviews on national television. Some people criticized it, said I was bitter, said I was exploiting my pain for profit. I didn't care. I'd spent too long caring what other people thought. The book wasn't for them. It was for the people who needed to hear that they weren't alone. That survival was possible. That healing, messy and slow and imperfect, was real. Jesse was released after serving 9 years of his 12-year sentence. Good behavior. I found out from a news alert on my phone. I stared at the notification for a long time. I didn't know how I felt. Angry, maybe. Or just tired. Tired of carrying him in my heart, even as someone I hated. He reached out a few months later. An email. He said he was living in another state, working construction, going to AA meetings, seeing a therapist. He said he'd read my book, that it destroyed him, that he understood finally what he'd taken from me. He asked if we could meet, just once, just to talk. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it for weeks. Talked to David, talked to my therapist, talked to Melanie. Finally, I wrote back. I said, I'm not ready. Maybe someday. But not now. I need you to respect that. He wrote back immediately. I understand. I'll wait. However long it takes. I haven't seen him yet. Maybe I never will. Or maybe someday, when I'm ready, when I've healed enough, I'll sit across from him and let him say what he needs to say. And then I'll decide if I want to forgive him. But that day isn't today. And that's okay. My mother died peacefully in her sleep at 78. She'd lived 8 good years after retiring. Years full of joy and travel and art and freedom. I found her in the morning, lying in her bed with a slight smile on her face, like she'd been dreaming something beautiful. We had a funeral this time, a real one. The church was packed. Former clients, former employees, friends, people whose lives she'd touched. Person after person stood up and told stories about her kindness, her cooking, her strength. Melanie spoke. She said, Mary taught me that it's never too late to find your voice. That courage doesn't mean you're never afraid. It means you're afraid and you do it anyway. I couldn't speak. I just sat there crying while David held my hand. We buried her next to her parents in the old cemetery. I planted roses on her grave. Red ones. Her favorites. Losing her broke something in me, but it also freed me. She'd lived. Really lived. She'd broken free from my father's shadow. She'd rebuilt her company, her reputation, her life. She'd traveled. She'd loved. She'd been happy. And that was everything. I carried her with me. In the recipes I cooked. In the way I ran the business. In the way I loved people. In the way I refused to stay silent. The years passed. The company continued. The advocacy work continued. My marriage deepened. Life happened. Not perfect. Never perfect. But real. Honest. Free. And that was more than enough. Now, sitting here, 20 years after my release, I think about everything that's happened. The pain, the injustice, the fight, the healing, the growth, and I realize something. I wouldn't wish my story on anyone. The suffering was real. The loss was real. 10 years of my life, gone, stolen. I'll never get them back. But I also wouldn't trade who I've become, the woman I am now. Strong, compassionate, unafraid to speak truth to power. She was forged in that fire, and she's someone I'm proud to be. If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll share it. Not because I need the validation, not because I'm looking for sympathy, but because somewhere out there, someone is sitting in silence. Someone is being blamed for something they didn't do. Someone is being told to sacrifice themselves for the family, for peace, for the greater good. Someone is being crushed under the weight of someone else's sins. And they need to know that they don't have to stay silent, that their voice matters, that speaking up is possible, that healing is possible, that justice, slow and imperfect and hard-won, is possible. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And if you're scared to use it, that's okay. Fear is natural, but don't let fear silence you forever. Find your people. Find your Melanie. Find your Karen. Find your Maria. Find the people who'll stand with you, who'll believe you, who'll fight beside you. And then tell your truth, loudly, unapologetically, because silence is survival. But speaking up, that's how you live. That's how you reclaim what they tried to steal. That's how you win. So live, loud and messy and imperfect and brave. Speak your truth. Fight for your freedom. Build something beautiful from the wreckage. And know that you're not alone. There are more of us than you think. Survivors, fighters, people who refuse to stay down. And we're here. We're listening. We're ready to stand with you. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about people who fought back, who survived, who turned their pain into power, then subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because the world needs these stories. The world needs to know that silence doesn't have to be the end, that justice is possible, that healing is possible, that freedom is possible, even when everything seems impossible, especially then. So keep going, keep fighting, keep speaking, keep living, because you matter, your story matters, and the world needs to hear it.